All right, so we're moving right along and we're exploring a bunch of the different common function categories. In this lecture, I want to dig into date and time functions a little bit. These basic date and time functions are super user friendly and they've got a really simple syntax. So, starting with today and now, these are volatile functions, which means that they update or refresh every time there's a workbook change. And those two functions return the current date or the current exact time, respectively. Syntax-wise, it couldn't be simpler. These functions don't even take a single argument. You literally open and close the parenthesis, and you're all set. Next, we have day, month, and year, and I call these component functions because they essentially point to a date and extract some specific components from that date, the day, the month, or the year. Again, syntax-wise, incredibly straightforward again. You just point it to a column containing your dates, and you're good to go. Same thing holds true for hour, minute, and second. The only real difference here is that you have to point to a column with a date time component as well. So because what these hour, minute, and second functions do is they ignore the date, and they really only focus on those hour, minute, and second components of that timestamp contained within that date time column. And next, we've got weekday and week number, and these are two of my favorite date functions. So weekday returns a weekday number. By default, it's 1 through 7, representing Sunday till Saturday. And week number captures the week number of the year. So for syntax, the first argument is the date column. The second argument is the return type. And this is where you can tell Power BI exactly how you want your weeks to start, whether it's Saturday or a Sunday or a Monday or a Tuesday, etc., etc. Next up, we've got EO month. And this is another helpful one. It stands for end of month because it returns the last day of the month plus or minus a specified number of months. So here's what the syntax for end of month looks like. You point to a start date and then you specify that number of months. So if you use a 0 for the second argument, the EO month function will essentially give you the last date of that current month. If you use -1, it would give you the last date of the previous month. And vice versa. If you used +1, it would give you the last date of the next month. And then last but not least, we've got date diff. And this returns the difference between two dates. But not only that, it also allows you to select a specific interval as well. So we've got date 1, your start date, date 2, your end date, and then your interval, right? And that interval can get as granular as seconds or as broad as years. So it's a really helpful function for calculating the difference between two dates. All right, so with that, let's hop over to our AdventureWorks file, and we're going to add a new date and date-related column into our model. All right, so from our AdventureWorks, the first function that I want to take a look at is the weekday function. And for this, we're going to go head up to our calendar table, and I want to create a new column. And again, this is going to be for weekday, right? So we're going to be creating a column that basically contains a value between 1 and 7. And we can very simply call this day of week, right? And this is going to equal weekday. Again, there's two parameters here, right? Or two arguments to this function. The first is date. So we need a column containing all of the dates. And then the second one is optional, right? It's our return type. So, and we'll take a look at that in a second. So from here, I want to use the date column from the lookup table. And then the return type, again, Power BI IntelliSense here is great because it gives me a list of options. It tells me if I select 1 here, that's going to be Sunday through Saturday. Again, this is the default setting. So if I left this blank, it would automatically default from Sunday to Saturday. If I enter 2, we're going to change the week start on a Monday to Sunday. And then if I were to enter 3, this is based off day of week values that are either 0 through 6. Here we're doing 1 through 7, so it doesn't really make sense. We had already created, you can kind of see it here, this start of week column. And I want to make sure that I'm aligning these weekdays with how we're defining the start of the week column. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to close this out and we'll let this default to the default setting. And what I'm going to do is we'll quickly come over here and we can see, all right, so our start of week starts on a Monday, right? 7/6, 7/13 starts on a Monday, right? So it looks like we wanted option 2 for this instead of the default setting or option 1. Right, so we can enter in our comma here. We've got the next argument of the function, and we're going to enter in 2. Right, so now this is going to align the start date with Monday instead of having the start of the week be on a Tuesday. If I select this column, quickly jump over, and you can see again, we're starting on that Monday, start a week. So again, super helpful function. It's really straightforward, right? But again, this is a great use case for it when you're starting to build out a calendar table and you want to create something like a day of week column within that calendar table. So now that we've got our weekday added, let's say that we want to create a new column for weekend. Basically saying if the day is either 6 or 7, we want to return weekend. Otherwise, we want to return weekday. So we're going to be basing it off of this day of week column that we just created. So we'll create a new column here. And we'll call this weekend. And this is going to equal, if we're going to use a logical statement here, if our day of week equals 6, right? And we can use the double pipe here for or. Day of week equals 7. Our result is true is going to be weekend. And if it is false, we want it to be weekday. We can close that out. All right, so we've got that weekend column now. You can see we got weekend, weekdays. Look down here, weekend is 7 and 6. Again, that aligns with how we had set up our day of week calendar, again, based on those start of weeks and the day names. All right, so everything looks good there. Now, with some of the text in these logical functions, we can actually clean up this DAX code a little bit. And we can use a function called in to basically remove this second row. So what I want to do is I'm going to delete everything back to here. And I'm going to say if our calendar lookup day of week is in, and I'm going to create a list. And we talked about this a little bit earlier in this section. And I'm going to use the curly brackets here, as in 6 or 7. I'm going to close the curly brackets, right? This is basically defining a list of values. Power BI looks at this as a table, but we're basically saying like, hey, if the day of the week is in this list, meaning it's either 6 or 7, then I'm going to return weekend, otherwise weekday. Right? And we've got no change here. Right? We still have our weekend days aligned with 6 and 7 for the day of week. So what we've really done here is just kind of updated and streamlined our DAX code a little bit. Using this in with the table constructors here is a great approach when you're trying to select multiple values, right? Instead of having to write out multiple lines of code. All right, there you have it. I know this was pretty basic, but these functions are pretty straightforward and really tend to be used more as components to other functions or for creating custom calendars with DAX. Up next, we're going to go through a quick assignment, and then we're going to jump into a function called related.